While I wasn't a fan of Cassian's storyline last episode, I found myself really enjoying it this time around. Even though we know he's going to make it out of prison alive, spending more time with all of the other characters there made me care more about whether they live or die, especially Andy Serkis' character, who has been developed into one of the most interesting side characters of the series so far. The storyline started off with a routine work shift, but seeing Cassian more familiar and comfortable with everything made it easier to watch on my part. Compared to last episode, I thought all of the scenes in the workshop flowed much better and had more value to them than last week, where Cassian seemed to just be standing around half the time. It's hard to tell how much time has passed, but in a later scene, Cassian takes a break to go to the bathroom, and we learn that he's loosened a panel on the wall, where he's been scraping away at a pipe. It's hard to speculate what this will result in, but since the last episode, Cassian has thought about the concept of escaping often, so it's somehow related to that. Since a prisoner committed suicide, which was seen in the last episode, a new prisoner is being brought to the level, and Cassian takes the opportunity to roughly plan a breakout strategy with another worker. They don't come close to carrying it through, but with how heavily this episode focused on the idea of escape or release, I feel like the next episode has to conclude this prison storyline. While it's gotten better as it's gone on, it's still not as enjoyable for me to see Cassian secluded from the rest of the main characters of the series, especially Luthen, who is completely absent from the episode. During a later hallway scene, the workers all learn that something has gone unusually wrong on level 2 of the prison, and this was where I really started to feel the stakes. Even though Cassian would be fine, it felt like there was a serious threat to everyone inside the prison, with no one knowing what was going on or what the Empire had done. At first I thought it may have been a revolt that led to the escape of the entire level, which would then work its way through the entire prison, but they began to hear rumors that the entire group was killed because they were making trouble. The mumbled whispering and confusion in the scene made it have much more of an impact on me, and Kino's delivery of his lines did such a good job of showing the terror he felt. He's nearly out of prison, and to learn that the Empire just massacred an entire group terrifies him, now that he's so close to his freedom. As the scenes progress, we begin to realize how much of a toll the work takes on Olaf, as he begins to be less and less useful. I thought that this was focused on a little too much, but it still made me care about the character more and established a concern for not only Olaf, but the entire table of workers. It gets to the point where he collapses in the hallway, and a medical doctor is brought in to look at him. Even though we've seen a lot of Kino's tough side as the leader of the floor, we get to see a bit of his softer side in the scene, as he expresses his concern over Olaf's well-being, even after the doctor learns that he had a stroke and decides to give him a quick death. The acting in this series as a whole has been great, but there were a lot of performances that really stood out to me in this episode, and Serkis's was one of them. It seems unlikely that he makes it out with Cassian later this season, and we'd probably never see the character again anyway, but I'm rooting for Kino to survive the series. Following Olaf's death, Cassian and Kilo learned from the doctor that a worker was released and later ended up on a different floor, meaning that when their shifts are up, the prisoners aren't actually released, just moved to different floors to keep working until they die. Word got out on that floor, and they were all killed. This information is the final straw for Kino, who despite being close to serving his time, has now realized that there's no hope for him getting out, so he finally gives in to Cassian's questioning from earlier and tells him that there are 12 guards on each level. In a matter of really only one episode, Kino had a great character arc, where he goes from serving his role and keeping everything in line until he gets released, to finally accepting what the Empire truly is and deciding to help Cassian fight back, which is why I think I enjoyed the storyline so much more this time around, and I'm very much looking forward to them working together again in the next episode. Moving over to Dedra's side of the episode, it was a rough start for me personally, but the later scenes really began to pique my interest. The acting in the interrogation scene with Bix was phenomenal, but in my opinion it lasted too long with too little happening, causing it to bore me. However, the concept of using the species' screams as a means to break a person was an interesting addition to the story. It does seem like Pac is going to be hanged by the Empire, and while I don't care whether they show it or not, I do hope that they show the fallout of the action throughout the town. Clem was hung much earlier in the Empire's rule, when sentiments about them were different, so I'm interested to see how this set of characters would react to this. As a viewer, I also have much more of a connection to Pac and the people who knew him well compared to Clem, who we barely saw and I never really cared for. Dedra later reports her findings during an ISB meeting, and as a huge fan of the mystery genre, I loved this scene solely because the pieces are starting to fall together, even if it is for the Empire's benefit. Although they still don't know much about Luthen, they are able to connect Cassian to the heist on Aldhani, and I also enjoyed the various rebel leaders separately mentioned throughout the conversations. There's a quick scene with Cyril and his mother, which I thought was just fine. It showed a little more of what his mother was like and how bad of a person she is. But then Cyril tracks down Dedra on her way to work to thank her for her help getting him the promotion. He mentioned the questioning last month, which really surprised me with how much time is being skipped over in between episodes. And then Cyril seems to awkwardly confess his feelings for Dedra, while also admitting to stalking her constantly. I haven't completely come around on Cyril's character yet, but I've really been enjoying Dedra recently, and while overcoming this could develop the character in an unforeseen way, based on what we've been shown so far, a romantic relationship between the two characters is the last thing that I want right now. Like many of these episodes have done so far, the final ISB meeting did a great job of wrapping up the storyline for the episode, while piquing my interest for the next episode. They capture a rebel pilot, who then confesses of a rebel plan to raid Spellhouse. Even though they are villains, seeing all of the brilliant people work on the problem was oddly satisfying to watch, and Anton Lesser's performance as Partagas has been excellent so far. Finally, it seems that Mon Motham's part of the episode just gets better and better as the season progresses. It begins with her in the Senator chamber speaking out against the Empire's increasing control of the galaxy, and despite the empowerment behind her speech, and the Senate being much more occupied than when we saw it earlier in the season, the constant shouting and pods shutting off show just how many senators don't seem to care about the rest of the galaxy. They're living in Coruscant where everything looks alright to them, so why bother worrying about the rest of the galaxy? Mon's tone and voice as she continues to talk shows just how hard it is to keep speaking up when she knows only a select few are even listening to her. As she enters the cab, Mon's driver informs her that her cousin has arrived, and we learn that Vel is actually related to Mon. When she arrives back home, Lita is holding a gown that Vel brought for her, and she makes a jab at her mother by saying that Perrin lets her do whatever she wants. We've seen a lot of remarks like this that hint at their stressed relationship, but I would like to actually see a thing or two happen that shows us how Mon treats her daughter, rather than just keep on alluding to it through dialogue. Vel plays dumb when Mon later refers to Luthen, but their conversation does a good job of showing the different ways they are trying to accomplish the same thing. Mon does everything behind the scenes, using her wealth and power to try and help those oppressed by the Empire. Meanwhile, Vel is on site literally fighting back against the Empire, doing jobs here and there to help a scrappy rebellion make some headway against the towering Empire. After a quick family meal, Vel leaves, but not before reassuring Mon that what they're doing is right. The familial connection to Vel gives her voice much more value to Mon, who is often in need of being convinced that the fight against the Empire is not going to be won in the Senate, but across the galaxy. We get one final scene that involves Mon and Tay Kolma, and she's starting to realize that they can't keep moving money around without anyone noticing. In order for her transactions to stay under the radar, she would need to get a loan from a thug named Davos Skalden, which would mean sacrificing a bit of her honor and moral code. Whether this happens on or off screen, this decision will leave a big impact on Mon and where her character goes from here. She's either going to become more and more public about her resistance to the Empire, or we'll see her start to realize that bad things are going to happen if she really wants to make an impact against the Empire. She disapproved of Luthen's methods before, but after she herself goes to a thug for help, we may see her become more open to bending the rules a bit. Nobody's Listening showcases powerful character development on numerous fronts, and establishes tangible stakes despite being a prequel for its two lead characters, earning a rating of 8.5 out of 10. And let me know what you thought of the 8th episode in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for more reviews like this, and remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, The Force will be with you, always.